Hi, this is Brent Grover from Evergreen Consulting for Advanced Supply Chain Solutions, powered by IBIS. This month's topic has been optimizing product availability. Today's conversation is part 3 in a series about optimizing product availability. And today we're going to concentrate on a specific area, which is communication between the distributor and the customer, and between the distributor and the vendor. But first, I want to ask you about your approach. What's your company's focus? Are you concentrating on the perfect order? Are you in another mode, let's say, working on it, but you don't feel you're quite there yet as far as the search for the perfect order is concerned? Or is your primary emphasis on inventory turns and less concentration on the metrics of fill rates and inventory availability? So your response to what I'm going to talk about may vary on with your philosophy, let's say, at your company, but how do the masters do it? The distributors who do the best job at balancing inventory availability and still obtaining excellence in terms of inventory turnover, because we know asset management is critical to achieving superior return on investment. So how is it done? And today we're talking about strong communications with customers and vendors. So the communication linkages between the three parties to the transaction, the customer, the distributor, and the vendor, depend mostly, the results depend mostly on the distributor's expertise in demand forecasting, and to a somewhat lesser extent, but importantly, on vendor lead time communications. And the emphasis here is on two-way communication between the distributor and the customer, between the distributor and the vendor. But again, it's two ways between both parties, the distributor being in the middle of the pipeline. So the cornerstone of all this, let's say, is historical demand. That's where the distributor builds their inventory availability. And one of the big questions there is, well, how many months back should I look at historical demand in order to try and project the future, even though trying to project the future based entirely on historical demand is flawed. But to start with, the basis is, well, what about the trailing demand activity for this SKU? Would it be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? I think a very good compromise is 3 months of historic trailing usage, and that does not take into account those items where seasonality is critical. One of the examples we often use is ice melt for janitorial supplies distributors in the snowy parts of the country. Obviously, you wouldn't use trailing 3 months in the non-winter season. You'd have to go back to the prior winter in order to project usage. But that's an unusual case. Typically, we're not dealing with items that have that much seasonality. So 3 months is a good starting point. 6 months might be smoother, but it's too far back in the past. Then we have the effect of substitutions, and good ERP systems have features to enable the distributor personnel to identify when an item is a substitution, and therefore not record the demand for the item that was shipped, but rather record the demand for the item the customer really wanted. But some discipline and procedures is needed in order to make that feature work effectively. And then a big factor that the computer doesn't know, only people know, which is non-recurring usage, where a customer orders a product for a particular project, or it's a one-time or an unusual purchase for one reason or another. So we have to tell the computer in our demand history that the usage is non-recurring and it shouldn't be factored into the equation. So this all depends upon the linkages that we have, the communication linkages between the distributor and the customer. Now, the customer has a vested interest in making sure that the distributor has plenty of inventory on hand when the customer needs it. That interest may encourage the customer to mislead the supplier and just to be sure that they have plenty of inventory on hand, which can cause the supplier to be overloaded on a product. But that's just part of the good two-way communication, and the sales professional has got to be able to have enough insight into the customer's business to track the major dollar items, that is, those items that are obviously really worth paying attention to, from the distributor's vantage point, but also the mission critical items that the distributor has made a commitment to the customer that they're not going to run out of those items that are absolutely essential to the customer's business. So also the ability to anticipate changes in the customer's business. The field sales personnel, the sales professionals, are the ones who can obtain the information by observation and inquiry with the customer in order to keep the inventory replenishment function at the distributor location up to speed on what they need to know to manage inventory for the customer. That also may bring up the question of, well, shouldn't we have written agreements with customers about key items or expensive items? And of course the answer is yes, especially if these are items that are unique for that customer, that can't be returned to the supplier without penalty, that have a high amount of dollar value. But in practical terms, we can't do that with every single item in our company. And even distributors who find themselves with a valid enforceable document from a customer don't always want to enforce that because they don't want to destroy the relationship with the customer. So I do agree that those guidelines in those agreements are important, and the agreements themselves can be very important, but they're not a guarantee that we won't have inventory problems at the customer, between the customer and the distributor. So vendor linkages are also of great importance. Lead times can vary greatly. Only good communications with the vendor can help the distributor keep track of the upcoming shortages and problems in the pipeline with the vendor. That's why distributors have safety stock, and sometimes there are vendor managed inventory programs or continuous inventory replenishment programs that help buffer the vendor lead time issues between the vendor and the supplier, of course, is what I'm talking about, and the distributor. But those VMIs or CIR programs usually only exist with the very largest suppliers. So last comment this week is about the effect of silos, in so-called interdepartmental silos. At a distributor organization, they can create a communications breakdown. And the customer demand information has to come from the field through the sales people, inside or outside sales. The replenishment planning department needs to be fully apprised of what's going on with the customer in terms of projected usage, so they don't just depend on historical demand. And also the availability from suppliers information comes from the purchasing department, which is sometimes separate from the replenishment function. Even the best ERP system with all the features that are needed to manage inventory will crash, and I don't mean literally crash, I mean the inventory replenishment system will work without ongoing communication. And that's a management question. Some smaller distributors have their salespeople handling the complete loop of communications between the customer and the supplier. Larger distributors tend to break that into, I hate to say silos, but that's somehow how it turns out. So guys, this is a management challenge, not just an ERP challenge. You got to have the right ERP system, and then communication is what makes it work. That's it for this week. It's Brent Grover from Evergreen Consulting for Advanced Supply Chain Solutions, powered by IBIS.